Hey everyone, this is Neo once again from the Overclocking magazine, and today for you I have another DDR5 kit. So this time we have the XPG Lancer DDR5 6000 kit, and it's rated at CL40 404076. So the going price for this memory is $2,933 at Progenix, or around $148 at Amazon if you can find it on Amazon. So I will not waffle on too long about this memory, primarily because I reviewed a Lancer kit just not too long ago, and this is identical to that one. The only difference with this one is that it's a higher frequency, it is cheaper fortunately, uses a different IC, and has an NPAC PMIC that I've never used before. So all of these things lead to the results that you are going to see later on, which we'll go through individually. So the long and the short of it is that when I reviewed that 5200 kit, the going price was about 3,700 and something, maybe 3,800. And the going price here is 2,933. So months later, you're getting higher speed memory, higher quality memory that looks better courtesy of the RGB, but it's actually costing you less. So if you did buy the 5200 at that point, at that price, then yeah, that's just how it goes with technology and advancement. So the cool thing about this memory as well is that it actually surprised me. I mean, if you're looking at CL40 404076 at 1.35 volts and just 6,000, which is the operating transmission rate, you're thinking, oh, this could be Samsung ICs. And if it was Samsung ICs, it wouldn't be a bad thing, but it wouldn't necessarily be the ICs of choice for me. The thing is, I got an M-die kit, and with that M-die kit as well, it didn't behave like all the other M-die kits that I've tested before. And the reason is, for one, it could do frequencies at much lower voltage than the other M-die kits I tested, and it could get to a higher frequency. At some point, I even thought I had AIDA, but then I looked at the product part number using Typhoon Burner, and it actually showed that, no, this is just M-die. Perhaps a different revision, I'm not sure, but it definitely is M-die. So why does that matter? Well, the thing is, 6000 CL40 is going to give you decent performance. In fact, it's going to give you better performance than what you would get at the reference frequency for 13900K, which is rated at DDR5 5600. So the interesting thing here is what happens when you overclock the memory. So when I talk overclocking the memory, did I go crazy and maybe do 1.55 volts or something? And I wouldn't call it crazy, but did I do 1.5 volts? No, there was no need. Actually, I stopped at DDR5 7000. I think the DRAM kit can do even higher, but I stopped at DDR5 7000 at 1.4 volts. And with that, that was CL34, 44, 44, 52. And the reason I have those settings is because, well, I'm using an Apex board, and I just loaded a profile and it was pretty tight. So there was no reason for me to faff around with the sub timings and so forth. All of that work has already been done for me. When I increased the voltage to 1.5 volts, I was able to go into Windows and run benchmarks at DDR5 7600, which shouldn't be possible, at least to my experience and what I experienced previously with the G-Skill kit and all the other kits. I was not able to get anywhere near 7600. But then again, I did change motherboards from, I think, the Z790 Extreme to the Apex. And as you know, the Apex is made specifically for tuning high-speed memory and so forth. So I don't know if it's the combination of this memory having a new PMIC that I've never used before from NPAC. Is it the motherboard, or is it the combination of the two? But either way, I came away very impressed with what this memory was able to do. But nonetheless, I will not waffle on. Let's just get to the performance numbers so you can see for yourself how amazing this memory is. So looking at the synthetic benchmarks, the first one we have is AIDA 64 memory bandwidth. And as you can see, the DDR5 6000 XMP settings are obviously giving better performance than DDR5 5600. The important thing that I want you to focus on here is just how much more value you are getting from this DRAM kit at DDR5 7000. 7-zip is the first synthetic benchmark that I always go to, and this one is very sensitive to memory performance. I mean, look at the difference between 5600 and 6000. As you can see here, there are huge gains just going from 5600 to 6000. Next up is Geekbench. I mean, the important thing here actually is the Geekbench 3 memory score. If you look at just 5600 to 7000, there is a huge gap in performance, at least in memory score. And that, for me as an enthusiast, or rather for my enthusiast, I think that this is pretty much worth it. For SuperPi, I mean, there's really not much to say here. We did expect this sort of performance. 3D Mark, of course, what review would be complete without 3D Mark? So I just used the CPU profiling test and TimeSpy Extreme CPU score, And as you can see as well, there is scaling. So we are going from 14,893 all the way to 17,000. Now, the interesting thing is that it scales from 5,600 to 6,000, but then from 6,000 to 7,000, you're not getting much. Another test that actually went up a little bit, not as much, is a times by extreme test. Again, we're going from 13,100 to 13,600 at XMP, and then at the overclock settings, all you are getting is basically 200 points more. Handbrake. This is a test that actually matters for people who do this sort of work. So basically transcoding, or rather encoding 4K to full HD and so forth. Yes, at XMP, you are going to get a slight advantage. I mean, I actually only recorded 1 second faster. It was consistent, but it was 1 second. But if you go all the way to 7,000, you get a reduction of what? 10 more seconds. So from the DDR5 5600 setting to the DDR5 7000 setting, it is literally 11 seconds, and that is quite significant. So you can imagine if you're doing a whole movie or a longer video than the one I was doing, that's just going to multiply. So the advantage that you get from using higher speed memory for video encoding is significant. Okay, so next up we get to VRay, which is a rendering test. As you can see here, the difference between the lowest setting, or rather the lowest score, which is 26,800, and the highest score, which is 27,600, is pretty significant. It's almost 1,000 points. And the nice thing here is that not only does it scale when moving from DDR5 5600 to 6,000, it scales even more when you do the overclocking. So I would expect that if you were able to run DDR5 7600 or maybe 8,000, you should be able to break into the 28,000 point range, somewhere there. Finally, we get to the game tests. And as you can see here, in Troy, the average frame rate doesn't go up by much. It's 5 frames per second between the lowest setting, which is DDR5 5600 again, and 7,000. But since we are talking about gaming here, every little bit counts, and you're going from 155 frames per second on average to 160 frames per second. Now, the XMP setting actually doesn't give you much more than 5600. It's literally 1 frame per second, and the minimum values for frame rates actually don't change as well. It's only when you go to the overclock settings that's where you start to see the performance gains. Guardians of the Galaxy. So this is a favorite test of mine to just show differences in CPUs and differences in DRAM settings and even overclocks, as you can see here. The crazy thing is that the XMP setting is actually slower than running DDR5 5600. So if you just bought this memory and just ran XMP, in this particular game, you would actually have lower performance than you otherwise would have at 5600. But the cool thing about it is that if you do overclock the memory, you get a huge performance gain. And we're talking about what, maybe 20 frames per second more. 262 versus 242 frames per second is nothing to snivel at. That's actually a big difference in gaming. Far Cry 6 shows some scaling that is pretty consistent with the other game as well. I mean, once again, we have the XMP setting coming in slower than the 5600 setting, but when you overclock it, you get 210 frames per second versus 199 frames per second. So there you have it. Those are the performance figures for the XPG DDR5 Lancer 6000 kit. I didn't bother with 1.45 volts or anything higher than 1.4 volts because I feel there's no need to. But from what I did get at DDR5 7000, I'm more than impressed. So yeah, that's that for this memory. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comment section below. And until next time, remember to share, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. So take care and peace.